Today on Forbes, the slow greening of the world's biggest oil company. Amin Nasser, the CEO of Saudi Aramco, declared this year that the age of fossil fuels is far from over. He said, quote, "Peak oil and gas is unlikely to come for some time, let alone 2030. We should abandon the fantasy of phasing out oil and gas and instead invest in them adequately, reflecting realistic demand assumptions." Of course, he would say that. He's the head of the world's biggest oil company, which is ranked number 3 on this year's Forbes Global 2000 list, down 1 spot from last year on lower oil prices. The Global 2000 list is our annual ranking of the world's largest public companies, which was released last week. As CEO of Aramco, Nasser oversees the production of more than 12 million barrels per day of oil and gas. Aramco is such a behemoth that both its output and $117 billion in net income is more than 3 times higher even than ExxonMobil, which is down 6 spots to number 14 on this year's list. Chevron, number 22 and down 4 spots, looks like a comparative pipsqueak with merely $20 billion in profits last year. And Aramco isn't going anywhere. With proven reserves of well over 200 billion barrels, it can keep that pace for decades to come. So yes, Nasser is biased. But the thing is, he's not wrong. Renewable zero-carbon energy is so far an addition, not a transition. For all the endless hype about the transition away from oil, gas, and coal, the reality is that the world has never relied more on carbon-spewing energy sources than it does now. Nasser said, quote, "In the real world, the current transition strategy is visibly failing on most fronts. So far, renewables can't scale fast enough, their upfront costs are too high, and they are not as convenient. For all of China's advances in erecting solar panels, for example, it still burned a record 5 billion tons of coal last year, 10 times US coal consumption. Electric vehicles now make up 19% of global car sales, yet global petroleum consumption continues to inch past 100 million barrels per day. According to Claudio Galimberti, an analyst at consultancy Rystad Energy, quote, "Oil demand remains sticky and will continue to rise, quote, as low-carbon alternatives are not yet sufficiently developed or economically competitive to offset the growing demand for transportation and industrial services." So it might surprise you to learn that Aramco, ironically, is already one of the world's biggest investors in the low-carbon transition. Nasser has dedicated 10% of its $50 billion a year in capital spending to renewables and launched the Aramco New Energies division. This year they completed the Sudair solar project with 1.5 gigawatts of capacity, while the 2.7 gigawatt Schwaiba solar field will be completed next year. By 2030, Aramco promises 12 gigawatts of solar and wind. The company is in talks with Spanish oil giant Repsol for a stake in its renewables business, building on an existing Repsol JV to make zero-carbon jet fuel using so-called green hydrogen and captured carbon dioxide. At Aramco's Jubail refining complex, they are building a system to grab 9 million tons a year of CO2. That will complement an existing process that captures carbon emissions from an ethylene glycol plant and turns it into low-carbon methanol. Yet if Aramco is going to deliver on Nasser's promise to capture and sequester 44 million tons per year of CO2 by 2035, it will need some new tricks. To hunt them down, Aramco has more than doubled funding to venture capital arm Aramco Ventures, with $4 billion available for investments. Among the most promising is a new investment of tens of millions of dollars that Aramco Ventures has made into a New Mexico-based startup called Spiritus. Born out of Los Alamos National Lab, Spiritus co-founders Charles Cadu and Matt Lee have developed a novel technology that they claim absorbs CO2 from the air. And unlike competing CO2 capture technologies, which rely on giant fans and compressors to suck in air, Spiritus's devices work passively, as quiet as a tree. For full coverage, check out Christopher Hellman's piece on Forbes.com. This is Kieran Meadows from Forbes. Thanks for tuning in.